Hi, I'm Tony Northrup, and for my photography buying guide, I have the new Sony a6000. This is the newest of Sony's, what they used to call their NEX series of mirrorless cameras. And it's basically replacing both the NEX6 and the NEX7. Well, in most ways, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. This is a really cool mirrorless camera. It has an APS-C size 24 megapixel sensor. So basically it's the same sensor that you'd see in the Nikon D3300 or the Nikon D5300. And it provides an amazing amount of detail and fantastic dynamic range. In fact, the challenge is actually going to be getting lenses that will give you sufficient detail to take advantage of that fantastic sensor. Now, there are lots of little improvements in this new Sony, but the one that you Sony guys are really going to care about is the autofocus. They have sprinkled phase detect sensors all throughout this thing, which means that you should be able to get close to DSLR level of focusing capabilities in this nice tight mirrorless package. The phase detect sensors cover about 92% of the frame. In some ways, that's even better than DSLRs at the similar price point, because $800 DSLR will have like 11 focusing points. And this thing has them spread all throughout the frame. They're not in the middle. You can focus on something in the upper right corner. That makes it easier to use things like the rule of thirds. But in my experience with other mirrorless cameras, even the phase detect focusing doesn't even come close to comparing to that of the DSLRs. So I'm not going to test that today. We'll test that in a future video, so be sure to subscribe to see those test results. The main dial here is kind of in an awkward place as you're holding it. To me, the mode dial here is actually more comfortable to switch than the main dial. And you don't often change the mode dial, but you're working the main dial all the time as you're adjusting your shutter and shutter priority mode, or your aperture and aperture priority mode. The secondary dial down here, which controls the exposure compensation in most modes, feels cheap and flimsy. It is tiny, and in fact so small that it's kind of difficult to work, and it doubles as the cursor control. They're equally functional. You can get to all the buttons and dials. They can do anything that you want them to do, but they're not placed in quite the way that a serious photographer would want. Nonetheless, it's really just a matter of training your hand. So even if you are a DSLR user and you're thinking about getting something smaller, you'll get used to it in a week. And if you're thinking about getting your first real camera, it won't trouble you at all. You will learn to love it. I find the viewfinder to be nice and bright and clear, and it works great even in bright sunlight. It has 1.4 million dots, which is about the same as this Olympus EM10, which has a similar price point too. It's substantially less than 2.4 million dots that you found in the NEX7, in the Olympus EM1, or in this Fuji X-T1. So that's kind of a minor consideration. I feel like having a higher resolution EVF is one of those nice to have things, but it's not a need to have. The lower resolution still allows you to perfectly compose the picture and verify that everything is sharp. But when you look through one of those high density electronic viewfinders, you appreciate it. You look through and you feel like you're looking at the real world. When you look through a viewfinder that has 1.4 million pixels, you feel like you're looking at like an 80s TV kind of, like, it's definitely pixelated. You can see the blocks in the individual letters on the writing that's on the screen. Nonetheless, I still like it better than even optical viewfinders, and it's plenty to get the job done. I've noticed some lag when working with the a6000. I feel like the viewfinder's a little bit slow. So I figured out a way to test this. I'm going to take my GoPro here. This will do 240 frames a second at the low resolution mode. And I'm going to turn all these cameras on, and then just looking at the viewfinder on the back of the screen, I'm going to drop a clapper. And I will be able to look at when the GoPro records the clapper shutting versus when each of these viewfinders sees the clapper shut, and count the number of frames. So 240 frames a second, I'll just count those and I'll be able to see the delay on each of the three cameras. So here I go. Does the lag make a difference when you're shooting? Yeah, it does, depending on the type of work that you're doing. If you're taking a posed portrait or a landscape or just casual photography, it doesn't make any difference at all. But if you're doing sports or wildlife or some kind of action, that can actually make it really tricky to track your subject while you're looking through the viewfinder. You'll find that you're just like a little bit behind. It can be a little disorienting too, but overall it's something that you get used to, and unless you're shooting action, you don't need to consider it at all. Speaking of the viewfinder, the Sony NEX series cameras have a viewfinder placement that's different than DSLRs or these other mirrorless cameras that I have here. It's smarter. It's in the upper left part of the camera body. And so let's just look at this Fuji X-T1 here. The Fuji has the viewfinder in the middle, and the Sony has it on the left. And why the difference? Well, the difference is that the Fuji was trying to look like a DSLR, because I think this X-T1 is Fuji's effort to attract DSLR's users into the mirrorless world. And they wanted to make DSLR users comfortable. And they wanted the camera, frankly, just to look cool, because people think this look, DSLR look, indicates a professional camera. But look what happens when I look through the viewfinder. You see it like smushes up against your nose, and it just always does that. Whereas with this camera, look, it doesn't hit my nose at all. It works great. It's just more comfortable to hold. All viewfinders should be in this upper left corner, so why aren't they? Well, with DSLRs, there's a physical mirror in there that bounces the light up from the lens to your eye. Therefore, the viewfinder has to be in line with the lens. But these have electronic viewfinders. There's no mirror in there. They could put the viewfinder anywhere they wanted to. They put it in the mirror for fashion reasons. And I personally don't find it as functional. But I do, looking at these cameras, I do think these two cameras look cooler than the Sony. I've asked a couple of people, and nobody thinks the Sony looks especially cool. These have like a cool retro look, and the Sony, it's function before form. If you get the Sony, it's because you care about the resulting pictures, not because you want to look cool with your camera. There's no posing about this. It's a functional camera, and Sony designed it function first, and the viewfinder is a great sign of that. But the overall design of the camera shows that too. It's got a nice deep grip. The dials are generally pretty functional, but it doesn't look as cool as the X-T1 or the EM10 or the EM1. So let's talk about some of my first impressions. Having worked through just about every mirrorless camera family now, the first thing that jumped out at me is no touchscreen. I always complain when a camera doesn't have a touchscreen nowadays, and everybody is always like, serious photographers don't need a touchscreen, but I love having a touchscreen because it allows me to review pictures really quickly. I can hit that play button, scroll through with my thumb, and then zoom in to check the critical focus. If it's a landscape picture and I need to make sure this mountain and the foreground are all in focus, I just pan with my finger. With every other camera, you end up pushing the magnify button and then using the little cursor keys to get around, and zooming in and out all the time, and it's just slow. But with a touch screen, you can review your pictures and verify sharpness so quickly. You can get done in a quarter of the time. That means you spend more time shooting and less time chimping. Please, Sony, give us touch screens on these things. We need them. It's also a little bit difficult to change focusing points. You have to push a button and then adjust the focusing point. I think Sony thinks most of these users are just going to have the camera select the autofocus point for them, but not me. I want to select the focus point myself. I have found that the face detection focusing works really well, and unlike the Fuji, it's not exclusive with the other autofocus systems. It'll just kick in at any time and automatically, and that's great because with these cameras, one of the things I do most is take it with me out to dinner, and I'm taking pictures of my family and friends, and so face detection, having it at the ready at all times is important, and so far it's working great. The Wi-Fi on the a6000 seems to work well. The app's a little clumsy, and it's not as nicely done as the Olympus, but it gets the job done, and you know what? They're all a little bit of a pain. I will say though that the Sony has this awesome app store, and the Sony cameras are the only ones so far that allow you to download and install apps, just like you can on your smartphone. Well, there are a couple smartphone-based phones out there, but as far as the big mirrorless cameras go, Sony kind of has that market cornered. And there just aren't many apps now, but there are some pretty fundamental things out there, including an app that lets you post directly to Facebook. And some cameras, like my Canon 70D, can theoretically post to Facebook through Wi-Fi, but it never worked really well because they want you to use the stupid Canon service. But with the Sony app, it will go right there for you. So I'll just show you the little app store real quickly. Here you can select application list, play memories, camera apps, and you can see right now it's connecting to my home Wi-Fi. All right, so here we can see there's not much in the store, unfortunately. Maybe some more apps will come along soon, but there are cool things in there. Just stuff that you'd get for your iPhone, like combining multiple pictures into a multiple exposure and adding some cheesy lighting effects. They also sell apps that are features that are built into the Olympus cameras, like the time-lapse feature here and some more complex bracketing. But nonetheless, it's still nice that you have the option to expand it. Here we can see the direct upload app, which will allow you to get your pictures directly to Facebook without having to go through your stupid camera phone, as long as you have a Wi-Fi network. Anyway, I think the potential for that is better than the actual reality of it right now. But if this takes off, I think it would just be amazing to be able to unlock the software-based capabilities of your camera at a later date. Something else that I think is awesome about the Sony that none of the other mirrorless camera families have, it charges with a USB cable. Finally, right? I don't know why every camera manufacturer in the world makes you get a stupid separate charger, and whenever you travel, of course, you're going to run out of batteries, so you have to bring that charger with you and plug it in at the hotel, and remember to take the battery out. With the Sony cameras, you just plug it in like you do your cell phone. And that means you can take advantage of all those cell phone accessories. You could plug it into the thing in your car and in the wall outlet. And it means that you travel probably with the same cable that you use to charge some other accessories. So you don't have to travel with anything extra. Anyway, thank you, Sony, for finally allowing me to charge a camera via USB. That makes it easier to travel. And this makes a more attractive travel camera for me. So now let's test out whether the HDMI allows you to record a nice clean signal, which might allow you to use it as, say, a replacement for a Panasonic GH2 or GH3, basically a studio video camera. I've plugged in an HDMI cable here, and looking at our in-camera studio monitors, it seems to be recording nice and clean. You can turn off the menu systems in the options so that you don't see them when you're recording. This allows you to record to an external recorder, something like an Atomos Ninja, or if you're in a studio environment, you can pipe everything into a switcher and do like live broadcast TV. We do that here, but we use Panasonic cameras, and this seems like it would work equally well. There is one big weakness as far as using this as a video camera, and that's that it doesn't have a mic jack. Or a headphone jack for that matter. Now, you can get a stupid Sony add-on that goes into the hot shoe here, and it comes with this ugly mic thing on it to use as an on-camera mic, and only then can you connect in a mic. I don't know why they couldn't just give you a little mic in. Every camera has a little microphone in thing, and this doesn't. So if you plan to use that, you better use either on-camera audio or be prepared to buy that awful, ugly Sony adapter. Another downside is that the video is limited to 30 minutes. So if you want to use it to record your kid's recital, you're going to have to set a reminder for yourself and restart it after 30 minutes. It's a pain for professional videographers too. Like we in the studio here can often record for more than an hour at a time. And that means we have to keep checking on the cameras and make sure they don't shut off. So for some people, that stupid 30-minute limitation, which is a result of European taxation laws of all things, not technology, a stupid 30 limitation is a real pain. And the Sony has it, and like some of the Panasonics, like the GH2, 3, and 4, usually don't have it, depending on whether you have the US or European models. If you have an Android phone, you might like the NFC feature, which allows you to more easily connect your phone to the camera to transfer pictures or do something else. I don't happen to have an Android phone, but I'll try to borrow one for a future test. Many people use mirrorless cameras with adapted lenses, so you can take a Canon EOS or a Sony Alpha lens or even an old FD or Zeiss lens and put it on here, and you won't be able to get autofocus. You won't even be able to control the aperture, though many older lenses will have an aperture ring on it. But if you're thinking about doing that, rest assured that this a6000 does make the focusing pretty easy. It really helps you out. It has zebras and focus peaking and magnified focus. And basically what that means is it will let you get nice and tight on the image while you're manually focusing. Even with this kit lens, if you put it in the proper mode and you manually adjust focus, it will automatically magnify for you, which does really help you manually focus. And in fact, it makes it far more effective at manually focusing than it is with a DSLR. even if you're using the viewfinder. So the a6000 is still new to us, and we really like to spend some time with cameras before we give it a full and detailed review. Just wanted to give you a quick hands-on review, but make sure that you subscribe to see the future revisions of this and our future updates. We're going to be putting it through an autofocus test. We're going to be doing a showdown between this and the EM10. I'm going to be seeing whether the X-T1 or this Sony focuses faster, because they both claim to have the world's fastest autofocus, so we'll see who actually wins. Check those out, and I'll see you soon. If you have any questions that you want me to address in future videos, just add a comment down below. Thanks.